Hello, everybody. This is the favorite part of my week when it comes to the Ageless Traveler, and that is talking personally to our podcast guests. Now, of course, as you know, we have everything in our show notes. You'll be able to see what's going on. But what I love about our guest today, Star Bradbury, is that she has a picture of her book, Successfully Navigating Your Parents' Senior Years. We're going to be talking about something we did not have. She's the Vanna White, right, of senior care. Here it goes. But we're going to talk about a couple of things. One of her principles. Two, the difference between, and I'm a big advocate of making this stop, confusing the older adult traveler with the disabled traveler. Not the same thing. But before I do a little fun, if you know what this is, then you are an ageless traveler. Think about it. Do you know what it is? Do you know what it is? It's a teacup. It's a very specialized teacup from Argentina. And
I've never seen one like that.
Yeah, it's a kind of tea. This is one of the brands here. And it's a tea that is part of a social ceremony. And it was funny because I was in Argentina with the social ceremony right after COVID. And nobody wanted to participate in the ceremony because they take the tea, they put the hot water in it, and they take a metal straw. And it goes around a circle and everybody takes a sip. So you should have seen the faces. So what did they do? They put it in a tea bag. So this is the post-COVID tea bag for the great ceremony of this. But that's what happens when you travel. You meet people, you meet people you never would have met before. You have wonderful relationships and they last. And that's what Ageless Travel is about. But it also is about being able to travel and freeing yourself to travel. And as we talked about, Star, and the issue for some people is their older adult loved one, they just don't want to leave. And these chronic conditions can last for decades. And people do not travel throughout their entire retirement. So
I think that's a big mistake.
Yeah, big mistake. So you've got hints and tips. You gave a lot of them on our audio. But you mentioned that in your book, you have two principles, one of which you did certainly go through with us on how to talk and communicate with a person who is not really ready to see themselves as needing care. And we talked about that. And please go, everybody, to our podcast and you'll see Star's wonderful episode. But there's another principle in your book, which you did not get to. And I said, let's talk about it here. What is that?
Yeah, because we could just talk for hours, Adrienne. Yeah. You know, you're a wealth of knowledge with your background as an elder law attorney. And of course, your interest in ageless travel and encouraging people, which I think is a wonderful message. It is not a message a lot of caregivers get. And I've seen people spend, you know, a good part of their retirement, which should have some joy in it because of their caregiving role. And as I like to remind, even though this sounds trite, and I know you've all heard it out there, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be around. You don't want to be the one that ends up in the hospital or worse, passes away first. You can only do that by rejuvenating yourself. And I promise you that you can travel if you really develop a plan to do that successfully. Don't wait and then suddenly try to hire people. Besides, your loved one needs to know these people so they're not full of anxiety that you're leaving. They're going to know that Susie is coming back and staying every day with you while I'm gone. And Margaret, who's the aging life care specialist that you know, that you like, she's going to check in on you every day while I'm gone. So you have a plan in place. You just amp it up, increase those hours. They're people your loved one knows. And you know you have someone who's a good communicator when you need it. But principle number two. So I feel compelled to at least say principle 1 and 2. Principle 1 is, how can I maximize and prolong my parents' independence for the longest possible time?
And convince them that that's what you're...
and convince them. And that is something both the caregiver or the adult child and the older person can relate to, because it's a point of agreement. You're starting on the same page. Everybody, including the adult children, want your parents to stay independent for as long as possible. And principle number two is applying what I call just-in-time senior planning. This is a concept I borrowed from the Japanese manufacturing world of just-in-time inventory. But what I tell people is just try to focus on planning in 3 to 5 year increments, meaning that I see families becoming overwhelmed with trying to plan for 10 years, or they find out their mom just got diagnosed with dementia, or their father has Parkinson's, and now they're spinning out their caregiving role way out into the future. It's a waste of your inventory, whether that's emotional or financial. Why do I say that? Because having been in senior living 25 years, I can promise you one thing. There's not many things we can promise. Things change, and they change quickly. Like you said, older people are like a potato chip. They look good on the outside and they break easily.
Yes.
So especially if your parents are getting into that slow go stage I refer to in our podcast, things change quickly. Only plan for 3 to 5 years. And the way that works is that you are applying the same Japanese principle of continuous improvement to your plan. A plan cannot be static.
Must be flexible. You know, I'm going to bring us back to a conference I actually went to last week. By the time everybody sees this on YouTube, it'll be many weeks ago. And it's at Stanford University. They have a longevity center, and they're talking about mapping the 100-year life.
Oh, I've seen that. It's fabulous.
It's a new map of life, and I was thrilled to be invited personally to the conference. But I also was, during COVID for 2 years, a executive director of a nonprofit called the Catalyst Institute. And it was all about the delay and prevention of age-related diseases. And I got to hang out with a whole new group of people, geroscientists, not gerontologists, but geroscientists.
They're scientists.
And they're pretty convinced that we will be able to live to 115. Now,
I think they're right.
If that is true, and I think they're right too, you can't plan for the third stage of life. Everybody, we're going to plan for the third stage of life. Folks, the third stage of life is 50 years long. Right. You know, this would be like you take a child and say, you know what, I'm going to plan for this child until they're 50.
Right. Think that's a perfect analogy.
Exactly.
Perfect analogy.
So this is the 3 to 5 year plan. And when it comes to travel, I will say you can do that for travel. Right now, we are very active travelers. The Ageless Traveler people are very active. I'm going to the hiking club this week. They want to do on our Portuguese trip, which you should go on, is go to the Azores. Then Lisbon is wonderful, Cascais is wonderful, but they want to go to the Azores because they can hike. We are in that stage. In 5 years or 6 years, you still want to travel, but it might not be hiking the Azores.
Correct.
So you take care of now.
Yes.
Now.
So what I love about what you just said, I think you need to train yourself, which you are. I see that, to be mentally resilient and redefine for yourself as you see your abilities change what traveling might mean for you. What it means now might be different in 6 years. That doesn't mean you're not traveling. It just means you may be traveling a slightly different way, or with more support services, or less hiking, more walking. You know, so as long as you're willing to redefine for yourself what traveling means at whatever age you're at, and really, I feel like age is not specific, because I've seen people 92 who could work me under the table, and people who are 60 who couldn't walk to the end of their driveway. So it's really
what you look like either.
And it's accepting that I believe this is true. And of course, I think the science is starting to prove this more and more. It's how do you think of yourself? How do you care for yourself? How do you define independence? For example, what I like to tell people when you go back to principle number 1, how do I maximize and prolong my parents' independence for the longest possible time? Well, now let's apply that principle to something difficult. And here's what I mean, because when I do public speaking, I have 4 different stories that help people see how they can apply this principle. So I had a client who was in his 80s. He was caring for his wife who went from mild cognitive impairment. Fast forward 3 to 5 years, it was progressing. Fast forward, and it got to the point where she was starting to wander. He wasn't getting any sleep at all at night. His health was starting to fail. His doctor was saying, Max, you just cannot, I know you're a devoted husband, but you can't keep doing this. And so we thought, well, what could he do that might help him and her? And think about it this way, maintain their independence for the age they're at and the circumstances they're in.
Exactly.
Meaning his independence now, because he wanted to stay in the home, revolved around getting enough sleep and enough rest to be able to be physically well enough to enjoy his life and also be there for her. Her safety and independence depended on more care. He started out with a daycare program.
Right, for her, which was useful to his respite and his peace of mind.
Yes, he got help transporting her there, so he didn't have to do that. She had a meal there during the day, so he could relax and have a little bit of a life. Eventually, it got to the point where she did go into memory care. But that's what I mean about rethinking what independence means.
Right. So, you know, as we end, I will say this to everybody listening. I could go over, but except that it's a video, and I would go over and I would cross out the word parents, because this is your next be successfully navigating your spouse's senior years.
True.
Or your partner's senior years.
True.
Because although the lack of travel among people who are the children of adults is an issue, and that's what we've been talking about, there's another kind of lack of travel, and that is when the 2 spouses or partners or companions age differently.
Yes, or their age differences, big age differences,
or they already have an age difference. There was a wonderful, her name was Janet Sainer, one of my great mentors, a gerontologist, and she was a commissioner of aging of the city of New York when I was a young lawyer. And she used to say, all babies are the same, but all seniors are different. That was her quote. Well, you're different from your spouse or your significant other or your partner. And what happens a lot is that one person's, usually the husband statistically, but not always, or the older adult, the older of the couple, they don't want to travel anymore. And the other person does. So what do you do about that? Well, that's one of the things that we really support people with the Ageless Traveler.
I do too.
And you can travel at different levels on the same trips. You can even travel on your own, but you're not alone if it's the Ageless Traveler, because we're a group. And you can do very special things to keep the person who's decided to stay home. They could go with you, but they want to stay home, up to date on your travels.
And so, hopefully they support you in still traveling, even if they don't want to. Hopefully they're
right. But even more so, once they see what a good time you're having, they go the next time. That's the key. There's really a method to this thing. But it's all about pre-planning. And we thank you, Star. And of course, we're all out to read your book. And it's not too late. It's not even too late for me to read the book, because we're all going to be caregivers yet again to somebody else in our life. And we're going to want to mentor the people who will be our caregivers.
Absolutely.
That's where the real control is. If you believe and understand your own aging and accept it, you can be independent much, much longer. And that's
I completely agree. Well said.
So thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure, and it won't be the last time that we're talking.
I hope not. Thank you, Adrienne. Loved it.